get started, I'd like to thank the Bitcoin Association Switzerland for hosting us, as well as Lucas Betschart for making this all happen tonight. My name is Michael Hazard. I'm an attorney on this case. I've been working with Tor Eklund Law for 3 years. And Roman happens to be a cousin of a friend of mine. And from my understanding and everything that we've seen so far, he's living in a Kafkaesque nightmare, completely innocent person locked up on the basis of junk science. And this is Tor Eklund.
And I'm a trial lawyer. I've been doing computer cases in federal criminal court in the United States for the last decade. And this is probably the most disturbing case that I've ever seen. I've seen aspects of this case in every prosecution I've ever worked on, but this case is a perfect storm. And I am sincere when I say that I believe Roman is 100% innocent. We're grateful for you coming out. Roman knows that people in the community now are coming out to support him, and he no longer feels alone. And so, without further ado, there's Roman with his cat. Basically, the United States government has accused Roman of running the custodial Bitcoin mixer, Bitcoin Fog, for 10 years and laundering roughly $330 million of drug money and everything else the government thinks he has done. What's interesting, one of the many interesting things about this very, very convoluted case to me is that there's not a single piece of evidence of him ever operating Bitcoin Fog.
Absolutely none.
But so why don't we tell you a little bit of a story? We've got some slides. We're going to keep this hopefully just to 45 minutes because you could go on for hours about this case.
We're going to take you through in a chronological order of everything that happened, as well as the investigation and the arrests that precipitated it. So we're going to begin with the case is unscientific, unverifiable. They're using a company called Chainalysis.
You may be familiar with that.
Do this blockchain analysis, and from our understanding, it's a completely unscientific method that they've used. Roman has been languishing in federal prison, actually state prison, on a federal contract in the northern neck of Virginia, rural Virginia, outside of D.C., a place he's never been, 6,000 miles away from his home in Gothenburg, Sweden. There's a cast of characters of the people involved in this prosecution. As you can see, we have Chainalysis right up top, Exigent, the IRS, FBI, DOJ, the Russia desk at the Philadelphia Department of Justice. Then we have some of the actors that have been putting profits over justice on the right. Former IRS investigator, creator of and founder of Exigent LLC, Aaron Bice. FBI agent who initiated the case turned lead prosecutor on this case, Catherine Pelker. The CEO of Mt. Gox turned government informant, Mark Karpelis. Department of Justice prosecutor on this case turned senior legal advisor and director with Chainalysis, Yuli Lee. Another prosecutor on this case who became a magistrate judge in the District of DC, Zia Faruqi, who has been making decisions that are favorable to Chainalysis since he got admitted to the bench. Andy Greenberg, who's a lead editor and writer with Wired magazine. He's also the author of a book called Tracers in the Dark, The Global Hunt for the Crime Lords of Cryptocurrency. And this book has a whole chapter about Roman's case. The list goes on. We got T. Grant Gambarayan, Matt Price, they're the arresting agents who worked with the FBI on this case. And then we have the mysterious Andrew White, who, from all that we can tell from the discovery that we've seen so far, seems to be more likely to have been the creator of Bitcoin Fog than Roman Sterlingov. We're going to begin with a short timeline to give you some background on the case and the kind of players and how this developed, so I'll let Tor take it from here.
Yeah, so just this, I mean, a lot of people here probably know this, but so the Bitcoin Fog mixer was on the Onion network. And so you had to access it through Tor. And I'm going to pause for a moment and just let everybody know that Tor actually is my real name. And both my parents were from Norway. Everyone thinks that I changed my name to become a computer lawyer. So you know, in the 1990s, they start the Tor network. Let's hit the next slide. It launches, in 2002, the Onion Project launches. In 2003, so Roman Sterlingov is born in Russia, but he moves to Sweden when he's 14 with his mother, leaving his dad behind. And one of the things that the United States government has done on this case is they've been, in the beginning, they were just like, he's a Russian, he's a Russian, he's a Russian. All you saw was Russian, 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 Russian. And one of the things we did was we changed the narrative to him being Swedish, because he hadn't really set foot in Russia, except right before his arrest when he had to do quarantine because of COVID in Moscow before he came to LA. Let's hit the next slide. So in 2004, the Navy releases Tor publicly. It becomes a nonprofit in 2006. 2008, everyone's favorite, Satoshi Nakamoto publishes his white paper. And then 2009, this is just more background, you can read through it. But in 2009, Roman starts to work for an internet marketing company in Sweden. And one of the things you do, it's actually not just an internet marketing company, it's a general marketing company that does internet marketing. And one of the things you do, and I'm sure probably a lot of people here have probably done it, is you register domain names for people. And that's one of the main things that the government's been claiming in this case, is that he registered the DNS registration for the bitcoinfog.com ClearNet site, not the Onion site. The ClearNet site, they claim that he registered that domain name in 2011. That's their main piece of evidence against Roman. It's not their only piece, but one of the things to notice about this case that really, really struck me is that there's not a single piece of direct evidence of him ever operating Bitcoin Fog. Unlike all my other cases, there are no eyewitnesses. Everything here is based on the speculation of investigators sitting at desks in Washington, D.C., 6,000 miles away. They don't even know who his friends are. They don't have any eyewitnesses who said, oh, I saw him, overheard him drunk in a bar talking about operating Bitcoin Fog. There's no communications with anybody about operating Bitcoin Fog. There's not a single piece of evidence of him ever operating Bitcoin Fog. They have built their case on speculation. 2010, Mt. Gox launches, and the reason that Mt. Gox is important to this case is, Mike, why don't you explain why Mt. Gox is important to this case?
The only thing that the government has, even kind of linking Roman to Bitcoin Fog, is an IP address that he used to log into his Mt. Gox account. His Mt. Gox account had KYC regulations at the time. He had his address and ID.
Know your customer.
Logged into the Mt. Gox records. The IP address for the shorman@hotmail.com email address that was used to register the ClearNet site purportedly matches with the IP address at the time that Roman used to log into his Mt. Gox account. Now, in the United States, an IP match is not sufficient to identify somebody. It's not personally identifying information whatsoever. You need more than that. There can be people connected to your IP address. You could be using the same shared VPN. So the idea that that's what they're using to prosecute Roman, to me, is beyond unreasonable. Now, Mt. Gox was created in 2010 as an online exchange for trading Magic the Gathering online exchange cards, and that's where they get the name Mt. Gox, which I thought was pretty interesting, MTGOX. And he first hears about Bitcoin at around this time, and he starts using peer-to-peer transfers. At this time, Mt. Gox wasn't for using Bitcoin. But in 2011, it starts to pick up. And at that time, Bitcoin is valued at about 30 cents. This is also the time when Mark Karpeles, who we introduced earlier, a French programmer, he spends most of his time running Mt. Gox out of Cerulean Tower in Tokyo. And if any of you guys have ever played Pokemon before, it's very Team Rocket of Mt. Gox to base themselves in Cerulean Tower. And so in 2011, September, Roman opens up a Mt. Gox in his true name, and he starts going to Bitcoin meetups just like this one. He's going to Bitcoin meetups in Estonia, Poland, Germany, Sweden. He starts getting involved with the same community that you're all part of today. In 2011, the Bitcoin Fog ClearNet website, which is bitcoinfog.com, is registered in the name of Akamasheti Omadetu, this Japanese for happy birthday, and it's registered using the email shorman@hotmail.com, which we will see popping up over and over and over again as the email address that is associated with the operation of Bitcoin fog.
And who is that email registered to? That email address?
Akamasheti Omadetu. It means happy birthday in Japanese.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy birthday.
It means it's Happy New Year.
Is it Happy New Year?
Yeah, it means Happy New Year. Trust me.
Oh, it's Happy birthday.
Trust me. I can't pronounce it, but I know it means Happy New Year.
So here's the convoluted tracing that the government uses to tie Roman's Mt. Gox account on the left, read under plasma at plasmadivision.com, to the hosting used to pay for bitcoinfog.com. And it's, you know, they even admit there's this big question mark in the middle of their analysis. And this is what we got in the criminal complaint after Roman was arrested. So you can see that Roman really is not connected to this string of transactions on the right. If we look at it from the right, we see highhosting.net is the hosting service for bitcoinfog.com. It was paid for by a Liberty Reserve account. Liberty Reserve, if you don't know, was an online exchange that would turn crypto into US dollars that you could then spend online. It was based in Costa Rica, and it has since been shut down by the US government, and all of the records were seized. Reportedly, this is where some of the information came from in this case. The Liberty Reserve account was registered to shorman@hotmail.com, big surprise. It came through ARM Exchange. Before that, it came from Kobasa99 at rambler.ru. And prior to that, it came from NFS9000 at hotmail.com. When we get the discovery subpoena returns, nothing from those two email addresses or three email addresses linked to Roman whatsoever. The only thing they have is the IP address used for paying for the high hosting and Mt. Gox or Plasma Division's Mt. Gox login. Now, government says that 36 Bitcoin transaction that went out on August 19, 2011 was reportedly the first link in this chain to pay for the hosting services. But when we look at the Bitcoin address mentioned with the big question mark in the pig, done by the government, there's a big question mark on it. That number down there, it doesn't match up. We can't find that on the blockchain. It seems to be incorrect.
And that's from the criminal complaint.
Everywhere we look in this case, there's things missing numbers. We look on the public ledger and the public blockchain, nothing. Things are incorrect. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact, and we'll get to this later, that the Mt. Gox records that the government is using to conduct this analysis are laden with errors as a result of their hack in 2014.
Let's go back to that for a second, because to me, this diagram typifies how convoluted this case is, right? And we can't figure this transaction out, right? And that's why they have their own question mark here. And you see all those Mt. Gox data. Well, one of the problems with the Mt. Gox data that they've given us, that we've discovered, is that there's only one thumb drive that had the Mt. Gox data on it that was given to Michael Groninger, who's one of the founders of Chainalysis. So Chainalysis, I know everyone here loves Chainalysis, I know that, right? So Chainalysis gets really started when Mt. Gox gets hacked. And Michael Groninger goes to Japan, and he's going to go investigate. Right? So he gets a thumb drive of all the Mt. Gox data from Mark Karpeles. And Groninger notices that it's missing data. Stuff's been deleted. So he goes and he talks to Mark Karpeles about it. And Mark Karpeles tells him, oh yeah, you know, we got hacked and, you know, people physically accessed our servers, right? So when we went back and we're looking at the Mt. Gox data, it's missing transaction dates. They've got transactions wrong. It's a mess.
Transaction hashes don't exist. Whole account wallets don't exist. Wallet addresses don't exist. It's
on a spreadsheet. That's a mess. So right at the beginning, that Mt. Gox data, we're going to try to keep it out, right? Usually this kind of crap comes in because the judges usually just say, it's up to the jury to decide the weight and credibility of the evidence. But right out of the gate, that Mt. Gox data is where they're getting the IP addresses, right? And another thing about the IP addresses, the government does not seem to really understand the concepts of proxy servers, VPNs, or the fact that thousands of people can share an IP address. Now, another thing to note about this whole transaction is there's absolutely nothing illegal about it. You can register the domain name for a website. That's completely legal. They're not even alleging that he designed the website. They're not alleging that he even operated the website. They're saying he registered the domain name in 2011. The statute of limitations on the charges that he's been charged with is 5 years. But this is completely convoluted. We cannot make sense of this, and we've got some pretty good people trying to trace it. Now we can move on. I just wanted to get my 2 cents in about how crappy the fucking, pardon my language, Mount Gox data is. It's not happy birthday, it's happy new year. You can see that. So the government thinks that Roman is Akamashite Amadeto, again, based on the Mount Gox data and IP address guessing. And again, this is all, there's no actual physical investigation in this case at all. This is a bunch of people sitting at desks in Washington, D.C., who've been spent about 2 years prior to Roman's arrest talking to the press, talking to Andy Greenberg for his book, if you know it, Tracers in the Dark. It just came out. It's worth a read if you want to learn sort of the backstory of Chainalysis. They've all kind of got stars in their eyes. This book has been optioned for a Hollywood movie by Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker. I read the book, and we found out things about our case that the government hadn't disclosed to us. Like they portray the conversation that our client has with the arresting officers, whom the government did not disclose to us. And
the book is where we found out this information about the Mount Gox records, where Mark Harpilas turned over incomplete records to Michael Groninger, that he then used to try to trace the hack and figure out how to do blockchain tracing, and started building Chainalysis on that research. We get to 2012, and we can see that in the government's superseding indictment that they wrongfully attribute forfeiture allegations, and there's wallet.
Oh, I love this. I love that wallet address. This is great. So you see this Bitcoin address right here? Right there. So in the superseding indictment is just a new set of charges, right? They supersede the old indictment. So the way it went procedure, it went criminal complaint where they arrested him. In the United States, if it's a felony charge, you have to have a grand jury indict. You can only arrest somebody for felony and not indict within 30 days of your criminal complaint. So they indict. Then we came in and we started making noise. They superseded the indictment. At the end of the asset forfeiture allegation, where the government says, we want to seize all this stuff, they say that that wallet address right there has about 1,100 Bitcoins in it. Okay, so we look it up. There's 0 Bitcoins in it, and it has not transacted since 2011. This, again, is typical of this case. We say that to the government. We say that in open court, and they say, well, actually, it's, you kind of use this kind of questions, and, he's got all this money that we're going to seize. It's maddening. It's absolutely maddening because it's not a rational discussion. And I honestly think what's going on here is there's a lot of confirmation bias because they're press hungry.
It looks like they came up with that IP identification early on in their investigation, and they never really moved on from targeting Roman, despite conducting a comprehensive investigation over almost a decade that cost tens of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. They had that idea in his head, and most of all, it originated from the Russia desk at the Philadelphia DOJ. And they got this idea that it's a darknet Russian cyber criminal named Roman Sterlingov. They never let that go, no matter how much more they learn about the case. And now we have an innocent guy sitting in a prison in rural Virginia.
And DOJ is just shorthand for Department of Justice. And so, as Michael said, this starts at the National Security Desk, or the Russia National Security Desk in Philadelphia. And it ends up in Washington, D.C., because the FBI agent who starts it, an FBI agent named Catherine Alden Telker, decides to go to law school in Washington, D.C. And she graduates from Georgetown Law School, a very good law school, and then becomes, surprise, surprise, a federal prosecutor. And then she gets assigned to this case, and she basically transfers it to D.C. Now, there's a problem with that. Because in America, you cannot be a lawyer that represents a party that you are a material fact witness in. In every case I've ever had, the investigating FBI agent is a material fact witness. I looked her in the face the first time I met her and I said, you know, you're a material fact witness in this case and you cannot be a prosecutor on this case. And she just looked at me and said, no, I'm not. So we've issued a subpoena for her testimony in this case, and there's a big fight over it. That's just another one of the little details in this case. But in my opinion, the only reason we're in Washington, D.C. is because Catherine Alden Pelker went to law school in D.C.
This case is her baby. You know, she's building her career on this case, as are many, many other people.
The prosecutors on this case are the main Bitcoin blockchain prosecutors in the United States. And they've made their name and they built their career on it. And they rose up alongside Chainalysis because this is one of the first government prosecutions in the United States that Chainalysis works on.
2014, it starts to get interesting in the investigation. This is when Catherine Pelker launches an intelligence note through the FBI intranet, kind of trumpeting Roman Sterlingov as the target of the investigation. And you start getting other FBI agents picking up on the case, realizing that it could be big. You know, this is something I could make my career on, and people start paying attention to it. They all want to take down this big, evil crypto mixer that's been laundering money for the dark web criminals that run drug marketplaces like Agora, Silk Road, and they're going gung-ho. 2014 is also the same year that Mt. Gox gets hacked, and this is when Michael Groninger steps in. He goes with the trustees who are representing Mt. Gox in the hack and says that, you know, I'm going to try to trace this stuff. And this is when we find out about the incorrect and terrible records that Mt. Gox has been keeping. There's also the time when Roman has made enough money that he leaves his job with Capo Marx Communication. Roman has been going around this whole time to Bitcoin meetups like this in 2011 through 2014, teaching people how to acquire Bitcoin, helping them to do so for a small fee. And as a result, he had accumulated a decent amount of Bitcoin. Now, with Bitcoin rising astronomically in 2014, 2015, he realizes that, you know, I don't have to work anymore. And he kind of leaves his job. And he just starts to live off the appreciation of his Bitcoin. He's not living like a crazy lifestyle with fancy cars and private jets, but he's living a relaxed lifestyle. You know, he's going to Spain with his girlfriend and doing what anybody else who would do in their mid-20s who accumulated a decent amount of money kind of out of nowhere.
Basically, he took his paycheck and he got into Bitcoin early. That's how he made his money. And if he was, one of the things that they're saying here with this Kraken account, right? Now, he used Bitcoin Fog. He was a user because early on, somebody said to him, a couple people said to him, you know,
at a meetup like this.
Yeah, you need to mix for your privacy. Now, Chainalysis, I love this when we found this report. Chainalysis issued a report saying that 90% of people who use mixers are using them for privacy and security concerns, right? He used it. But if you were the operator of Bitcoin Fog and you were laundering $330 million, right? Would you set it up so that your royalty payments from Bitcoin Fog went to Kraken? In your, you know, your Kraken account in your own name that you put the passport up for? It makes no sense. And the other thing doesn't make any sense.
That's what the government is alleging is in the Kraken accounts that were later seized. That the funds are the direct payments of service fees, the 2 to 3% service fees that Bitcoin Fog charged users when they use the service.
And if he was getting the royalty payments from Bitcoin Fog into his Kraken account, over a course of 10 years, Bitcoin Fog charges between random fee of between 0.5% to 3%. He should have tens of millions of dollars. When he's arrested, he has just under a little bit of $2 million. Everything we look at is consistent with him actually just taking his freaking paycheck, investing it in Bitcoin. Bitcoin skyrockets. And then in 2014, he's like, I can live off of this. So he leaves his job.
And the Kraken records support this. You can see in the records that the deposits are coming through Bitcoin Fog, but at the beginning in 2014, after he sets up his Kraken account, you can see deposit, 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 and the deposits kind of lay off, and you see withdrawal, withdrawal, withdrawal. He's living off of the money that he put in there in 2014, 2015, 2016. There's no service fees coming in, or there's not a lot of deposits even in 2017, 2018, 2019, when Bitcoin fog was at its peak. You know, there should, if the government story is correct, we should be seeing tons of incoming deposits into those accounts, but we're not, because the whole story is consistent with Roman telling the truth, because Roman is innocent.
And this whole period, by the way, again, no evidence of him ever operating Bitcoin fog. They're pointing to the deposits in the Kraken account as evidence of him operating Bitcoin fog. As one of the things that drives me crazy about this case is there's sort of a provincialism on the part of the prosecutors. They just don't understand this world. And everywhere they turn, they see something sinister. And this, I look at the Kraken account deposits, I'm like, yeah, he's taking his, you know, the Bitcoin he bought with his paycheck, he's running it through a mixer and he's putting it in Kraken, right? It's not a big deal, but they don't understand this world. And that's what should actually concern everybody in this room, because this could happen to anybody in this room.
It's scary. 2015 was a big year for Chainalysis. This is kind of when they get off the ground. In August, they have their first publicized payment from the United States government in the amount of about $9,000.
I like that point about Mark Capellas. Another thing is, Mark Capellas is arrested by the Japanese government, right? Remember how I told you there was only one thumb drive with data from Mt. Gox? What he's arrested for and charged for and sentenced to 4 years in prison in Japan for? Falsifying Mt. Gox data.
In order to inflate Mt. Gox's holdings by about $33.5 million in the fallout from the hack. But
does the U.S. government prosecute him? No, they give him a job. Mark Karpeles is working for the United States government right now. He's one of the people who worked on this case, as far as we can tell. I think there's more evidence that Mark Karpeles ran Bitcoin fog than Roman did. Anyhow.
So in 2016, you can see that Mark Karpeles is released on bail by Japanese authorities, and he's required to stay in Japan. We'll see later that he begins working with the U.S. government. This is also around the time when Roman, he's trying to diversify his jobs and how he's getting money. He's worried about Bitcoin's fluctuation in 2016. He doesn't know if it's going to keep going up or if it's going to crash completely. He quit his job. So he sets up a VPN service called To The Moon VPN. Now, this is pretty funny because, you know, for being an alleged computer genius who didn't leave a trace of creating and operating one of the world's most complex Bitcoin mixers, you know, his VPN service basically fails. He can't get it going. He can't get enough customers. You know, he's making a couple bucks here and there, but it pretty much fails.
But much to the government's excitement, the servers are in Romania. Right? And there's all these moments in this case where you can see the government getting really, really excited. And they think that they've got it. And one of the times that they get really excited is when they seize the Romanian servers. They get the Romanian servers, right? Because those are going to be the servers that Bitcoin fog is operating from. You know what they find on those servers related to Bitcoin fog? Nothing. Right? So in every other Bitcoin prosecution that you have, most of which did not go to trial, this is the first case that is challenging this kind of blockchain forensics, as far as I could tell, in the United States. They seized the servers. We don't have servers here. They have logs. We do not have logs here. They've got communications. We don't have that here. They've got corroborating evidence besides the blockchain forensics. We do not have that here. If you're familiar with Silk Road, Ross gets arrested at a public library, was in the Bay Area, with this laptop open to the admin panel to Silk Road. There's another case called Harmon, which these prosecutors prosecuted right before this. In Harmon, Harmon has Google glasses, and he takes his Google glasses and he accidentally takes a photo of the admin panel to the site he's being prosecuted for. You've got nothing here in this entire case that corroborates any of the speculation. I invite any of you to look over this case, point something out to me. I've been telling everybody who comes on to this case, you know, if you see one thing that makes you think that Roman is guilty, I want you to tell me. I want you to tell me, because that's a different case. I'll defend him, you know, whatever. Nobody has pointed to a single thing. The only thing that happens is everybody gets pissed off and they come and they work for us for free.
You know, going off the servers, there's so many points in this case where the government is about to think that they got them. We're finally going to grab the servers. We're going to get the logs. We're going to get some admin logins or communications with somebody who helped Roman operate this Bitcoin fog service for 10 years. And every time they think they're about to get a treasure trove, and you can see that in the communications that the government is having within each other, the discovery. Like, there's a point where one of the lead investigators even is aggressively stating and typing in Excel documents, like, I hope we're not wrong about Roman. Like, it'd be terrible if we're wrong about Roman because none of this adds up. They continue to work on this prosecution.
They look away when that happens.
They look away. They choose to be blind to the truth.
Let's talk on Chainalysis real quick, because this is one of the first cases that Chainalysis makes its name on. So they go from the Mt. Gox. This is, I think, DOJ's oldest blockchain prosecution. And you can see at the beginning of this case, Chainalysis basically has a market valuation of 0. Now they've got a market valuation of $8.6 billion. And they did that in part on this case. And we can see them building their relationships, particularly with the IRS and a IRS investigator named Aaron Bice. Now, Aaron Bice is a very interesting IRS investigator because he comes in to the IRS as a subcontractor, basically from another company whose name we're going to keep out of this for the moment, right? And while he's at the IRS being paid by my taxpayer dollars, he starts a private company while investigating this case. It's a private company called Exigent LLC. Somehow, we don't have the contracts. We don't have anything. The government has not given us anything about what Exigent did on this case. But, well, I guess he starts a freaking private company. And when Roman is arrested, well, maybe we get to Roman's arrest, in the press release from the Department of Justice, Exigent LLC is thanked prominently above all these other agencies, all these other people, right? 5 months later, Chainalysis buys Exigent LLC for an undisclosed sum that we're pretty sure is millions of dollars. That's what, to me, is one of the things that at the root of this case, is that there's a profit motive that is distorting justice.
And it permeates every layer of the case and everybody involved with it, whether you be a government agent, a private company engaged with the case, and everyone's profits rely on Roman being guilty.
If Roman's not guilty, Chainalysis all of a sudden has a big problem because they used this case to do a Series E's fundraising round about a month after Roman was arrested. If you follow Chainalysis' fundraising rounds, they do it usually right after a DOJ press release, right?
In 2017, we also had an incident here where Roman was visiting Miami with his girlfriend and his mom. And the FBI and the IRS put him under surveillance. They pen trap all of his computers. They put the phones at his hotel under wiretap. They have cameras going all around Miami watching him enjoy his holiday. This is another one of those, you know, that's like tens of millions of dollars to do that kind of thing. And
a pen trap, by the way, if you don't know what a pen trap is, a pen trap traps all your signal traffic. So they have them in the United States, the operator Bitcoin Fog, they claim. They have him under physical surveillance. They're taking photographs of him. They've wiretapped him.
They're tracking him everywhere he goes.
Tracking him everywhere he goes, and they're tracking all his signal traffic. Do you know what you're going to get from there of evidence of him operating Bitcoin Fog? Nothing. But they can't let go. They cannot let go of this. There's Aaron Bice registering Exigent LLC.
Here's Mark Karpelis being found guilty of falsifying Mt. Gox data to inflate his holdings by $33.5 million. He's sentenced to 30 months in prison, but that sentence is suspended. And at some point after that suspension, he begins working with the U.S. government. This is also around the time when the U.S. government starts getting very interested in Bitcoin. They start publishing guidance and regulations, and right now there's a big battle between whether it's a commodity or a currency. They're saying that it's both, but how can it be both?
Or security. And there we have our friends, the IRS investigators. Like, you might wonder, why is this case in Washington, D.C.? I wonder that too. I'm a little bit of a constitutional law geek, and the United States Constitution requires all federal criminal trials to be in the state and the district where the crime occurred. Roman Sterlingov has never set foot in Washington, D.C. He has no family or friends in Washington, D.C. He knows no one in Washington, D.C. So why are we in Washington, D.C.? Well, of course, we've challenged this, but in 2019, the IRS decides that they're going to do a sting operation. And so what they do is they essentially send, it's a little more convoluted than this, but they essentially send a message to what they take to be Bitcoin Fog's help desk. And the message is basically this. Hi, I would like to launder some illegal drug money. I just sold a bunch of Molly. Is your mixer a really good place to launder my illegal drug money? No response. No response
There's
at
no
all.
counterparty to that message
There's like
whatsoever.
nobody. So they go and they mix a government Bitcoin on Bitcoin Fog, and they put it back in a wallet that they say is in DC. That is the sole reason that the government claims that they can have this trial in Washington, D.C. The reason you should be concerned about that is because if that is correct, then any prosecutor in the United States can go onto your website, interact with it without you even knowing about it, and then arrest you and prosecute you in Montana, in Kansas, wherever. This, to me, is one of the scariest things about this case, that you know, if you're not somebody who spent a lot of geeky time with the Constitution and technical criminal procedure, you're not going to notice, right?
The United States is trying to manufacture global jurisdiction
through the internet.
Cryptocurrency.
Through the internet. And that's essentially what happened to Roman. And they also did like 3 or 4 of these transactions, but they got the wrong sites and they messed it up. There's also like a Keystone Cop element to this case that's like maddening.
2020, we start to see the development and chain analysis really starts to become valuable. And all their investment, all their Series A, B, C, D, E, private equity funding rounds, they're lined up with DOJ press releases, government press releases thanking them. Every time they get thanked in a press release, they go out and pursue more private equity funding. It starts small with about $20,000, I think was the first one. By Series E, D, E, F, they're getting $100 million each round. They're doing it multiple times a year. They're getting investment from huge private equity firms out in San Francisco, New York, and they're building a company that now has hundreds of millions of dollars of federal government contracts and has a valuation of over $8.6 billion.
Because their business model is making money off of law enforcement, right?
And relationships with law enforcement.
If you've got a product that doesn't get guilty people, doesn't result in convictions, are you going to make money? No. That's the conflict of interest, right? And that's what I think is a really, really disturbing thing about this case as well, is that the profit motive has been brought into the criminal justice system, and you cannot have that. You cannot have that. And I think it has led to confirmation bias, if you're familiar with confirmation bias, which is, I don't think these people are evil like, whoa. I think that they've got stars in their eyes because of all the publicity. They're being written up in all the newspapers and books and everything like that. It feels great to get attention. I freaking love it. Everybody loves it, right? I love money too, right? But I'm not prosecuting people based on that. And chain analysis uses this case to sort of just get themselves into the Department of Justice. That you can see them networking with Aaron Bice and everybody, and they're rewarding everybody. They hired Yuli Lee, who's a prosecutor on this case, as their senior legal advisor. They buy Aaron Bice's company. Everywhere you turn, someone is making money in this case, and the only person who's not making money, Roman. He's been sitting in a damn jail for 2.5 years waiting trial.
So 2021 was the year of his arrest. So he was in Europe, and COVID, of course, was going on at the time. And at the time, you couldn't fly from the Schengen zone into the US. Now, his VPN business had failed, and he had decided that he was going to pursue a career in aviation. In fact, Tor and I have these bracelets on that Roman made from toothpaste and plastic bags in the prison. And I told him that I'm interested in learning how to get my private pilot's license up in Canada. And he has some acronyms that are related to aviation on them. and Tor has one as well.
I just got my name on it.
You know, the reason he went to America in the first place at this time is because he was registered and signed up for a flight training course in Sacramento, near Sacramento. And that's why he was flying into California. Now, because he couldn't fly directly from the Schengen zone, the only way for him to go, strangely enough, without having to abide by these COVID restrictions and everything at the time, was to do a 2-week quarantine outside the Schengen zone. So he went to Moscow. When he was in Moscow for 2 weeks, he then took a flight direct from Moscow to Los Angeles. The government gets wind that Bitcoin Forward's creator is coming to America, and somebody makes a snap decision to lay down the arrest and arrest an innocent man that day. The plane lands in LAX. FBI agents come on the plane. They take him, put his hands behind his back, take him to a facility within the LAX airport.
Los Angeles International Airport, if you don't know.
Big airport in California, and they arrest him. You know, and there's a whole chapter in Andy Greenberg's book, Traces in the Dark, about the arrest. And, you know, we found so much information about the arrest from that book because it wasn't disclosed to us at first by the government. We only found out what to ask the government for from reading the book, which is ridiculous.
It's a little disturbing. And so when they arrest him, now mind you, the government has been talking to the press now for about, well, particularly Andy Greenberg from Wired. And one of the things the government didn't count on was Andy's a friend of mine. And he's been covering the firm for 10 years. And so Andy calls me one day about something else. And I'd just seen the Wired cover article on Chainalysis and all this stuff. And I said, hey, Andy, man, are you sure this stuff works? Silence. And then I tell him I'm rapping Roman, and I hear panic in his voice. Because he's like, Tor, my final edits on my book are due on Tuesday. This is a Friday. And I'm like, oh, man, you got a problem. So there's a quote of me from the book, like some anodyne quote, and it's me saying, oh, we're going, Roman is innocent, we're going to trial. But you know what I think occurred to him at that moment? That he'd never bothered to check whether any of this stuff worked. And I've asked him, did you talk to anybody? Do you have any peer reviewed? What evidence do you have that any of this works? He's like, oh, well, I had a conversation with one of the prosecutors, and they said, well, we've successfully prosecuted people based on it before. Nobody could cite any scientific evidence that any of this tracing is actually valid. But Wired magazine, Andy Greenberg runs an exclusive article before DOJ issues the press release about Roman's arrest. And in it, Jonathan Levin, who is the CEO?
Co-founder,
CEO of Chainalysis. Now, Chainalysis has been working on this case since 2015. Now, Jonathan Levin doesn't mention in this article running in Wired, trumpeting this arrest that Chainalysis has been working on. He does something very interesting, I think. He just says, this proves that this kind of blockchain forensics,
the arrest proves,
works.
And they've never had to prove this at trial because in the United States, almost every criminal prosecution goes to a plea. To fight a trial at the federal level properly in the United States costs millions of dollars.
And this is also the next day DOJ puts out its press release trumpeting Exigent LLC that we were talking about before.
On May 6, 2021, a California U.S. magistrate judge hears Roman. He's appearing with a federal defender. He didn't have a lawyer. The government has seized all of his money. He's in a foreign country. And the judge gives an order to detain Roman indefinitely, right off the bat. They then transfer the case from California to Washington, which is the government's preferred location of prosecution. And then they seize his money. They seized his Kraken accounts that were held in his own name, as well as Kraken accounts that were held in the name of To The Moon VPN. Those ones admittedly didn't have so much in them because VPN business didn't do particularly well. But this money that was in his accounts were still left over from the appreciation of Bitcoin back in 2014 and 2017 because he had been engaged in collecting it and hodling it since 2011.
And mind you, the government's charging him with money laundering and having illegal funds. They haven't identified a single crime, not a single one. Like that,
They're also missing an entire element of mens rea. In the United States, you need to have the mental capacity to commit a crime. You have to intend to do it. What they're doing here is they're basically turning money laundering into a strict liability crime with no mens rea element, which is extremely dangerous, for everyone across the world engaged in crypto, especially when they're trying to expand criminal jurisdiction to anybody on the internet. It's scary. We can see that in August of 2021, the contract actions between the IRS, Aaron Bice's former employer, and his company Exigent, which is going to be acquired later in the year by Chainalysis, they start to get ridiculous contracts for $3.5 million. You know, there's other ones for $2 million, $4 million. Looks like they're making in the what, 10 figures?
This case made Aaron Bice rich. And Aaron Bice is one of the main IRS investigators in this case. He's now a multimillionaire as far as I can tell.
In November of that year, the federal defenders who are working with Roman, we're still not on the case. We still haven't heard about this. He can barely even contact his family because he can't phone Sweden from a payphone in a jail in California or Virginia. So the federal defenders trying to get him out. They make a motion for bond for pretrial release, which is pretty standard. You know, if you get arrested, usually you're out on bail until your trial, and after your trial, you have, if you're convicted, then you have sentencing, and then you go to jail afterwards. And the judge denies it. And there's only two reasons why you can deny bail in the United States. The first one is that you're a threat to the community, that you're dangerous and crazy or very violent, and you can't be out there. The second one is that you're at risk of fleeing the country. Now, they use Roman's Russian nationality as justification to say that, you're going to flee to a country where we can't extradite you from. They also have a lot of innuendo in their motions.
Flat out like racist.
And this is just ridiculous. They're saying that because he had 4 passports, that they must be fake. And this is a government, they can check this stuff. And he was Swedish, so he had 2 Swedish passports. And if any of you are familiar with Swedish citizenship laws, they give 1 passport for traveling and then a second one as a backup in case you want to go to Israel and then Jordan, because Sweden is engaged with the international community and they want their citizens to be able to travel. Now, Russia, they have an interior passport that's required for going from one oblast to another, and then they have an international passport if you want to travel outside of Russia. So these 4 passports, 2 from each country that Roman had in his possession at the time of his arrest, were all completely legitimate, but the prosecution paints it as being some evil thing that only a dark web cyber criminal would be able to access 4 passports, and thus he's at risk of fleeing.
And I think it typifies the investigation in this case is that they basically told the court that these passports were fake. Now, again, as like Michael said, you can check whether a passport is fake or not. Just ask the government that issued it. They did not do that.
They didn't communicate with Russia. They didn't communicate with the Swedish government. They communicated a little bit with the Swedish Prosecution Authority, but not on the passport issue. It just, it's complete confirmation bias. They had their guy since 2014 when they saw that these IP addresses matched. And they've just built the entire case and investigation around trying to prove that it's him because it gives everyone financial profit.
And we left out one detail about the arrest. So he's in LAX. He is arrested with 3 laptops. I think it's 3 Raspberry Pis, 3 terabytes in hard drives, a bag where he keeps all of his thumb drives, if you've ever done that, handwritten notes with all his backup accounts, because he's traveling for 2 weeks, so he's taking everything with him. Do you know what they found in there of evidence that he was operating Bitcoin fog? You guessed it. Absolutely nothing. So that's another one of those wah, 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 wah moments. Yet they doubled down because they've spent millions of dollars. We're now about, 7 years into this investigation? Everybody's, we've been talking to reporters. We're getting ready for movie deals. We've got our Series E fundraising round for Chainalysis for $150 million. But we don't have any corroborating evidence. But you know what? We have that DNS registration. You registered a website in 2011, so I'm going to charge you with a felony where you face 50 years to life. Oh, yeah, and I think you got some royalty payments because I saw some stuff coming into your Kraken account and some other stuff. Yeah, we're going to use this Mt. Gox data. This Mt. Gox data from a convicted criminal who was convicted for falsifying the data from the company that we're using against your client. This case pisses me off.
We can see in 2022, Roman's in prison now. Roman is languishing in the Northern Neck Regional Jail, which is a jail that is owned by 2 judges.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Great detail. A jail owned by 2 judges. No conflict of
This
interest.
is the jail that Paul Manafort served time in, that Michael Vick, the NFL quarterback, served time in for dogfighting. It is a nasty jail in a nasty location in the U.S.
It takes us 2 hours. No, it takes us 6 hours to drive there from New York City. 6 hours back, so it's about like it was like $2,000 just the whole thing. It's a nightmare. And the last time we were there, they accused us of trying to smuggle in cigarettes because I think Mike had a pack of cigarettes that he took out of his pocket. We put it into the locker, and now they're saying we cannot visit with our client except behind glass.
They're trying to separate us from
They're
Roman.
just everything they try to do
trying
is
to hammer
they
us.
try to sandbag you. Anyhow.
In 2022, while Roman's sitting in prison, you can see that Exigent is getting all these contracts with the IRS. You can see that we took on representation in February 2022. I was out for dinner with my friends in Bushwick, Brooklyn, at a place called Seawolf on Wyckoff Avenue. And my buddy from the Cape, he calls me and he's like, dude, like my buddy's cousin got arrested. Like, we need your help. It's this crazy crypto case. And this is when we first find out about it. We, of course, thought that, you know, we were going to go down, and we thought he was guilty. We looked at the complaint for 5 minutes, and we saw all this evidence, and they're convoluted diagrams with lines everywhere and crypto accounts. We go down, we talk to him. We think, okay, maybe you know, he knows. If he didn't do it, at least maybe he knows who did.
Or they got him for something else. I thought we were just going to cut a deal.
We talked to him for 5 minutes, and it becomes immediately apparent that this guy is 100% innocent.
And that's a problem, because now you can't cut a deal without lying, because he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anybody, right? Like, so if he's going to, and if you're probably not familiar with the U.S. system, but if you cut a deal with the government, you become an informer, it's sort of like entering into an abusive relationship. And they are, it's a very strange power dynamic and psychology that now I've seen over the last like 10 years, where they kind of own you, and you almost should just go to prison.
This is likely the situation that Mark Karpelis finds himself in.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that guy.
Now, there has been a little bit of progress in this case. In March of this year, we were trying to get Roman's funds that the government had seized that we showed you earlier, roughly $1 million something. We tried to get them released to fund his defense. The court denied it. However, in the judge's decision, and I think it's interesting, during the hearing, we actually put Roman on the stand, and the judge was like, oh, no, you don't want to do that. You know, Roman, are you sure you want to go on the stand? Because, you know, you can incriminate yourself if you're on the stand. If you could incriminate yourself because you were guilty, but Roman's completely innocent. So he goes up there. And the prosecutors, became so clear that they knew nothing about his life. They're asking him, at one point they're standing there like, tell us who your friends are. Tell us who your friends are. Who is your boss? We're like, you did absolutely no investigation into his life in Sweden whatsoever.
They didn't know what his job was. They didn't know how much money he made from his job. They didn't know who his family was. They didn't know who his friends were. Why? Because they sat at a desk in Washington, D.C. and guessed. They guessed at this.
They were focused with, like we're saying, the dollar signs and stars were in their eyes rather than conducting a proper international investigation. Because if they had done that, they would have reached the same conclusion that we have, that he's innocent. Now, in the judge's opinion and order on denying the funds to be released for some small issue with how it works in the U.S. with probable cause when there's a grand jury, and how that was enough to be probable cause, and that's all you need. You don't have to prove anything at this point. But the judge, I think, was rather sympathetic to the situation and saw the truth coming out of Roman's statements he was making up there. And one of the things that he said that is good news for everybody in this room is that he said that in the United States, using a crypto or Bitcoin mixing service is not in and of itself illegal without anything more. And that's big because, you know, that's what he did. He did use it. He didn't operate it. He didn't launder any money through it. You know, everything he did was legitimate and for his own privacy and security interests, just like everybody in this room is concerned with. And this is the first time that an Article III judge in the United States has come out and actually confirmed that it is legal to use a crypto mixer or Bitcoin mixer. So that's big.
I think another positive thing about that decision. I mean, what he essentially said, if you're familiar with the grand jury system, he said, well, I have to assume for purposes of making this decision that Roman was the operator of Bitcoin Fog. And because I have to assume that, then I have to assume that he mixed illicit funds. So I can't release these funds, right? You have to, in order to seize the money, you have to tie it to the illicit funds. But we can see him changing his view of this case, because that was a big thing that we were working on as soon as we came in, was changing the story of him being this Russian crypto criminal. And the judge says, well, you know what? There is no evidence where any of this money came from. The government didn't put in any evidence that it was illicit. I just have to assume it for purposes of this
Because the
motion.
grand jury found an
Because the grand jury found probable cause. But at trial, we go to trial in September, the standard is much higher. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. We're almost done.
So April, that's now. The Bitcoin community, you guys are coming together. Since we were on Citadel Dispatch last week, we've started to see donations coming in to support Roman's case. It's something that, we've never seen before. Support
Yeah,
like
it's
this.
really
We
great.
think the community, you guys are really helping Roman out, and he's extremely appreciative of it. He was in a bad space a couple months ago.
We're borrowing to pay for this case, and we are not lying when we say that we're on the verge of eviction from our apartments.
Both of us are.
Both of us.
Right now.
Like, Mike and I are all in on this case. I'm 100% convinced, and so is Mike, that he is innocent, and an innocent man is sitting in jail because of chainalysis, because of career-minded, profit-minded federal prosecutors. I have never, in my 10 years of being a criminal defense lawyer doing computer crime, seen a case like this. I've seen confirmation bias. I've seen what I considered to be prosecutions that were wrongful, but usually the person that maybe they were going after had kind of done something else, and they were using this as an excuse. This guy's clean, man. This guy is clean. This person is any one of you sitting here. Picture landing at Los Angeles and being arrested and being told you laundered drug money for 10 years, and then sitting in a jail in Virginia for 2.5 years. DC, we talked about the venue thing.
Absolutely no corroborating evidence.
Not a single piece. Every other prosecution has corroborating evidence. We talked about Silk Road. We talked about Harmon. There's no corroborating evidence.
Now, in the discovery, there is a lot of corroborating evidence for other
people. Yeah.
But the investigators have completely ignored that
Because they're Americans,
confirmation bias.
not Russians.
They need it to be Roman.
Yeah, they need it to be Roman. You can't have it like a 10-year multi-million-dollar investigation and not catch somebody, right? That is not good for your career.
Now, what's really scary as well is that chainalysis has developed these close relationships with prosecutors and people in the federal government, and they're kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. They're saying Roman's guilty, but they're not showing us the code. They're not showing us the logs. They're not showing us the input data that they use for their chainalysis reactor software. They're not showing us anything. We've asked for it, and they've shut us down and entered the docket with their own lawyers in order to protect their proprietary data because they are too important to have to disclose this information.
They won't show us the source code to chainalysis reactor, so that's going to be a big fight as well, because we subpoenaed it. We said if you're gonna accuse somebody of money laundering and have them face a sentence of 50 to life, you need to show us your source code. They're like, we don't have to show you our source code. We said, Michael Groninger, you need to come to trial and testify. You know what he said? I'm too important. That's what they said in their opposition. I'm too important. I don't have time for it. We said, Jonathan Levin, you need to come. You need to testify. I want to ask you some questions, man. Come on. Let's go, brother. Let's go. Oh, no, I'm too important, right? So the only people that are hiding anything here, it's not Roman.
Roman's on the stand.
It's chainalysis. It's Jonathan Levin. It's the government. We're not hiding shit.
So yeah, Roman's languishing in this Kafkaesque nightmare in a rural Virginia jail with 60 people to a room. He can't review his electronic, well, he gets a little bit access to a computer, but he can't have, like, he can't use programs on this computer. He has to look at PDFs and whatever native data that happens to work on the terribly shitty computer that they have in the prison.
And they record all our phone calls with him.
They record all the phone calls. Now they're not letting us talk to him in a room. We got to talk to him through a glass with a phone. And he's facing 50 to life. They're going to end this guy's life. You know, and a couple of years ago, or they're trying to end this guy's life, you know. A couple of weeks ago, you know, he was in a bad mental state, and we're just like, hang in there, buddy. We're coming for you. You know, the community's coalescing, and we're going on this trip around Europe to try to get your story out, and you know, the Bitcoin community is coming together behind you. And when we told him that, you know, you could hear the hope come back to his voice, and it was
yeah, he's grateful for that, and we're grateful too for the support, because this is insane.
It's unbelievable. So these are some of the costs that we face as the lawyers handling this matter.
Yeah, damn, it's expensive. And this is why, so in America, with a federal criminal prosecution, if you really want to take the government on, it's usually between a $1 and $2 million proposition, right? In America, 90% of federal indictments plea out, as they say. People take a guilty plea. And a lot of people plead guilty even if they're innocent, because most of us do not have a couple $1 million to do a trial. Another dirty secret, right? There's not a lot of really good trial lawyers in the United States because everything pleas out, right? There's only a handful of us, right? So 90% plea out, 8% get dismissed, 2% go to trial. Of those 2%, less than 1% result in an acquittal. So you can see what the odds are. To me, that's a rigged system. That's not a fair system. That the government is successful in, you know what, over 99% of their criminal trials that they go to trial with, I think is absolutely insane.
And DOJ understands this. That's why they think they can get away with this shit with Chainalysis. You know, it's so blatantly unfair. And the system is so unfair that to them it seems realistic. It's ridiculous. There's Roman at the airport.
So that's it. We're open to taking your questions. Please feel free to donate, because man, we need the money. Just to, you know, we're going to the end. I'm doing this. My first trial I did with $5 in my pocket, and there was one point. It was in New Jersey, and just in New Jersey, I did not know I was going to afford train fare to New Jersey. It was the case that made my name, and somehow we won it. Right? Not that trial. We won it on appeal, like we thought. Right? But this is another one of those cases. I think this is, to my mind, the most important blockchain, Bitcoin case, criminal prosecution in the United States right now. Nobody has challenged the federal government on this. Nobody has challenged Chainalysis. And they look at us when we say, fuck you, show us the evidence. I don't buy that crap. They're shocked. They start clutching their pearls, right? So anything you can do just to spread the word. Send us emails if you have thoughts. Go ahead. Like, if you see something, I say this like I say to everybody, if you see anything that makes you think that he's guilty, point it out to me. Point it out to me. And with that, we're open to questions if people want to ask questions. And thank you for listening to us. Thank you.